And so I'm going to be doing a video comparing the usefulness of all of the sword-styled magics, such as the Fair and Flash Sword, the Soul Greatsword. There's only 5 of these in the game. The Old Moonlight, the Dark Edge. And then the Life Hunt Scythe isn't really a sword, but it's, you know, it fits sort of in the category, as you can see, in terms of magic that forms a illusionary weapon, basically. So just weapon magics. I suppose you could count the lightning arrow in that, but I've already done, you know, something explaining the usefulness of it and how it's basically just a better sunlight spear. Does half the damage, but takes less than half the magic, so it's basically just more useful. Anyway, let me get to it. In terms of casting times, all of these swords have about the same, except for the Fair and Flash Sword, which is the quickest. Now, the Fair and Flash Sword, the sword comes out immediately. It takes about a second for it to hit your actual enemy, whereas the Soul Greatsword, it takes a second to appear, and then because you're swiping from the side like that, it takes another second for it to actually hit the enemy. It takes about another second for it to actually hit the enemy. Same thing with Old Moonlight, except it can take even longer because it has the actual blade part of Old Moonlight has less range than the Soul Greatsword. Not to mention the Soul Greatsword, because it has that wide sweep, it can hit a lot of enemies around you. Like, it can hit nearly in 360 degrees. Let me get a good test of this. Hold on. I can't remember if you can actually hit enemies directly behind you or not. Let's see. I'm gonna wait for him to actually hit me. No, it doesn't hit enemies directly behind you, but so not nearly 360. It's nearly 180 is what I should have said. Oh, I don't have enough magic to use it. Hold on. Whatever. I was pressing the circle button to dodge, but you know. And as you can see, it's not something that you really want to use when you're in front of the enemy like that. Like it's obviously a dumb choice to just casually use a spell that takes around 2 seconds to actually hit the enemy in front while standing in front of the enemy. These moves, Soul Greatsword and Old Moonlight, if you're going to use them in PvE, it's better if you use it on enemies that don't know you're there, because like if he was charging me like he is now, there's no way that I'd be able to hit him with the Soul Greatsword or the Old Moonlight before he came. But if I'm using the Dark Edge, then I'll definitely hit him. Let's see if I can get him to run again. No. Well, I mean, I won't definitely hit him, but you know what I mean. Because you can see from the way that this swings, it just comes straight forward. It's better for when an enemy is actually rushing you. Like that. I just didn't activate it quick enough, basically. But as you can see, if they're not doing a rush attack, you know, like holding the blade out to stab you and running forward, if they're just walking towards you, basically, the Dark Edge is better than these two, because before it even hits them, they will hit you. Whereas the Dark Edge, because it goes straight forward, it won't hit you, basically. Also, one thing to mention is the Fair and Flash Sword only uses 4 focus points, and these two, the Old Moonlight and Soul Greatsword, use 23, whereas Dark Edge uses 26 focus points. And then Life on Scythe only uses 20, so in terms of FP cost, this is, of course, gives you the most bang for your buck. Because while it is weaker than all the rest, it's not extremely weak in comparison to them, basically. Whereas all of the other ones will definitely one-shot these guys. The Flash Sword won't. It nearly one-shots them. But the Farron Flash Sword is the most useful because it's got the quickest casting time and you can get more use of it out of situations. Like, even in... Like, the Farron Flash Sword is even useful in PvP. In fact, it's more useful in PvP than it is in PvE. Much like all of the swords are, but Farron Flash Sword is just the best in terms of them because its versatility is a lot better. It basically gives you a straight sword. Like, if you didn't have your weight skill, not weight skill, vitality I believe it is, that increases your carrying weight. If you don't have that very high yet, but you've got some magic on you, at least 24 in intelligence is what you need to be able to use the Farron Flash Sword, if I remember correctly. If you have at least that, and the Farron Flash Sword, you get it pretty early on. You get it in, I believe you get it in Farron Keep somewhere if you search in the right place. It's been a long time since I've gotten it. But it functions exactly like a straight sword. It has about as much flinch, not flinch, but it staggers the enemy about as often as the Dark Sword did before it was nerfed. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, it's about as much as the Dark Sword did before it was nerfed, because it got nerfed somewhat, and then, so it doesn't do as much in terms of staggering. Like, you can get away from it more so now. But in terms of usefulness in the other ones, the Soul Greatsword, its use comes most in terms of PvP, because when you're just fighting the enemy and then they're dodging back like this, if they only do one dodge, you can just use your Soul Greatsword, and usually by the time their dodge finishes, this will hit them. And not to mention, it just gives you a more options to use in battle. But the old Moonlight is actually better in that same scenario, because it has that little projectile that it launches. And the old Moonlight will do more damage than the Soul Greatsword if both parts of it hit. Because the old Moonlight's got the actual sword part and it's got that projectile part, and both of them can hit the enemy if they're close enough. So, old Moonlight, it's got more range than the Soul Greatsword does. In terms of the attack, because it has that little projectile. But Soul Greatsword has more range just for the regular sword, because as you can see, the actual sword in Soul Greatsword's longer. This one's probably about half or a little more than half the length of the Greatsword you use with this spell. And this sword isn't as long as the Soul Greatsword either, because it's as you can see, it's a curved Greatsword. But I've already explained where Dark Edge is the most useful. When, you know, just when the enemy is coming straight towards you. Because in terms of casting time, like I said, this comes out instantly, takes moments to hit the enemy. Whereas this takes a second to come out, and it takes another second for it to swing and actually hit the enemy. Same with this one. Okay. While it comes out instantly in comparison to the regular Soul Greatsword, which takes a second to come out and then a second to swing, This comes out instantly. It takes a second for you to stop holding it up, and then it takes a second for you to swing, basically. Whereas this comes out instantly, and it takes 2 seconds to swing it. But it's swinging straight forward, so you don't have to wait for the side swing. Because it's more like saying, rather than it taking 2 seconds to use the old Moonlight and the Soul Greatsword, it's better to say it's not exactly 2 seconds. It's a little more than 2 seconds. It's about 2.5 seconds before these attacks actually hit, in comparison to this one, which just takes 2 seconds pretty much. I don't have anything that can time down to the microseconds, but you know, that's about it. And Life Hunt Scythe, it does not have as much usefulness as the other ones. It does only take 20 FP in comparison to the like I said, the 23 and 26 of these ones. But it has the added bonus of healing you, basically, when it hits the enemy. But it does not have very much range. Like, it's very close quarters. Like, it probably only has about as much range as my Black Blade here has, in terms of the actual range of the attack. Let me get damage so I can show you how much it heals. I believe it heals 120, so let me see how much I took. Okay, I took exactly 118 damage there. Alright, so I don't know if it depends on how much life the actual enemy has either. Alright, I've hit him once. And as you can see, I've recovered 120 health, because each of those arrows do 118 damage to me, and I was at 1001 with the first hit. But now, after I have killed him, if I had only recovered 118, I would have had 1001, but I've got 1003, so that means I recovered 120. Of course. I mean, obviously you can do basic math, but you know, sometimes you really don't feel like doing it in your head, so I did it for you. But yeah, in the Life Hunt Scythe, I believe it takes around, it was either 2 or 3 seconds, let's see. Yeah, it takes about a half a second to come out, and then it takes about a second, 2 seconds, about 2 seconds to swing. Yeah, it takes, so it's another 2.5 seconds. It takes the same amount of times as these two to hit, basically. Whereas this just takes 2 seconds, and this only takes a second to hit. And whereas this does a fraction of the damage that these do, it's a lot more reliable, and you can use it quicker, and it actually stuns the enemy, whereas these ones might stun the enemy, but you can't just spam these, basically. Because even though old Moonlight looks like you can do it faster than Soul Greatsword, you can't. It just looks that way because of the way the spell works. And you might not be of the same opinion that it just looks that way either. Now these are really just estimates on how long it actually takes for these to hit, because I don't have a counter next to me that counts down to the microsecond, so I'm really just guessing that this takes a second. It might be slightly shorter or longer, and I'm really just guessing that these take 2.5 versus this one only taking 2 seconds. Like I said, I don't have something to actually time. And of course, all of these spells become even more useful if you're PvP wise. If you have different things in your hands and you change up what you're using, of course. I mean, that just makes you more versatile in general, and people don't know what you've actually got, so they don't know what to avoid. But like I said, in terms of the usefulness of Old Moonlight and Soul Greatsword and just PvP, is they're really just best if the enemy's backing away, pretty much. So that's something that you would just have in your slot. You know, you're just wailing on them, and then it's like, oh, they're dodging, and you just use it, basically. Whereas Life Hunt Scythe, it's kind of trying to get Life Hunt Scythe off in PvP is like trying to get the Dark Hand attack, you know, it's special where it does the suck. It's like trying to get the suck off on some dude and expecting it to work. Like, it's not gonna work. You never get the suck in PvP. You never get the suck. You want the suck because it gives you so much health, but you won't get the suck. And then it's basically, the Dark Hand, of course, is pretty much useless outside of PvP, because I believe there's only like 3 or 4 human enemies in the entire game, pretty much. Like, there's not very many actual humans in the game. And even when you actually find them, they just, you know, you kill them and they stay dead. So you don't really get much use of the Dark Hand, you know, in-game, except for the fact that it doesn't need scaling and it does decent damage, actually, after they you know, buffed it. But of course, the Dark Hand is not what this video is about. It's about these, like I said. And that's going to be about it. Now, I might actually do a little side-by-side with these spells, so that you can see how long it actually, how long they take side-by-side. You'll know if I actually did that in the video or not. I'm not gonna cut this part out where I'm explaining that, because I don't feel like it. As you can see, I put them side by side, most of the spells. And what I found out is, when I put them side by side, I was actually wrong. Every spell other than Farron Flash Sword takes the same amount of time to do, basically. It's just the amount of recovery time afterwards, like the amount of time it takes for you to go back to your original position before casting the spell, is slightly different for some of them. But once the actual spell is done, you should be able to dodge a roll anyway. So it turns out that Old Moonlight, Soul Greatsword, Dark Edge, and even the Life Hunt Scythe all take the same amount of time. Only thing that's faster is Farron Flash Sword, so all of them are actually more viable. But what I was saying, as far as it hitting the enemy, is the same. Anyway, that's your update. But that's pretty much going to do it for the video. So, like it if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't, subscribe if you want. You know, you can watch the next video that I make as well if you really want to. I can't, you know, just make you. Anyway, I'm not going to take any more of your time. Bye.